Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's session is entitled Be Prepared, Know What You Need to Know to Prepare for the TAGME exam and to be the content expert at your job. And your presenters today are me. I am Terry Noseworthy. I am the Program Director for Graduate Medical Education at Boston Children's Hospital, and my co-presenter is Caitlin Hope, who is the Program Manager for GME at Boston Children's. I recertified for the second time last year, first certified about 15 years ago, and Caitlin is taking her recertification exam this year. We have nothing to disclose. And our goals and objectives for today are to locate requirements and documents related to GME and the TAGME exam, including ACGME, ECFMG, AAMC, EROS, NRMP, the entire alphabet soup of GME. To identify tools to help best use these documents, and to develop strategies to maintain familiarity with needed information and to prepare for the exam. So what is TAGME? TAGME is the National Board for Certification of Training Administrators of GME, and it establishes standards for the profession. So it acknowledges expertise that is needed to manage GME programs. We all need a lot of expertise to be good at our jobs and to recognize people, GME administrators who have achieved competence in all areas related to their profession. So why do people take the exam? You might be required to if your institution has it as a requirement on your career ladder. We do at Boston Children's for some of our higher level GME positions require TAGME, but it's not the only reason to do it. You can do it to demonstrate your expertise and your professionalism and the achievements that you've made. So many of us who work in GME report to people who don't quite understand what we do. So this can help you show them that your role requires specialized knowledge and that you have a commitment to what you do. It can also help as a tool for promotion, even if it isn't on your career ladder, as it shows a commitment to your professional development and it demonstrates your knowledge base. It also might give you a leg up if you're looking for a new position to be able to put that on your CV. For the exam, everything you need to know is in the TAGME certification guide on their website. There's no question on the exam where the answer cannot be found in the guide. It's an open book test and you will have access to this information and you can search it during your exam. There is no reason for you to purchase materials or pay anyone for any sort of materials related to TAGME. All of the questions are based on the documents that they give you and make available to you during the exam. However, the fact that it's an open book test doesn't mean you can just sit down and ace the test. You have to be familiar with the documents and have some idea of where to find the answer in order to be successful. And the way the questions are worded and the subtleties of differences in many areas of GME make a difference. So it's important to be familiar with the material. You don't have to memorize it, but you do need to know where to find it and how to navigate all of the various requirements. And then one key thing about the TAGME exam is that it's information you need to know all the time anyway for your job. Much of this is information you need to know how to access in your daily role as a GME administrator. So even if you never take the exam, these things, for the most part, are all documents you should be familiar with and know how to find. And again, you do not have to memorize them, but you should know how to find them and be familiar with them. There's really no way you could memorize all of these things. It would be a monumental task, and there's really no reason to do that. Both for the exam and your job, you can always do the research before you provide an answer. So we're going to start with the big topic for the TAGME exam, the ACGME, everybody's reason for being. The ACGME has a literal ton of documents that are represented in the TAGME exam, and some of them, like the program requirements, you might be familiar with those, but since it's the same exam for everyone, regardless of specialty or role, there may be some that you are less familiar with. So we're not going to go through all of these documents individually. We'd be here till next Tuesday, but there are a few things I really want to call out. So there are different program requirements for residency and fellowship. They're not wildly different, but there are some differences. So make sure you pay attention to that, the common program requirements for residency and the common program requirements for fellowship. There are also ACGME requirements, which you may not be familiar with if you're at the program level. If you've ever wondered why your GME office is asking you to do all those things, I promise you that they are not just trying to annoy you. There are a lot of things that the DIO and the GME committee are supposed to oversee, and the GME office is carrying those things out. If you see a FAQ, read it, because often the ACGME uses FAQs to provide some clarification or additional information that's missing from the actual requirements. Good example of this is in the institutional FAQs. There is a clarification on the I'm sorry, not in the institutional FAQs, in the common program requirements FAQs. There is a clarification on duty hours and how it should be averaged that is missing from the requirements. On that same note, check out the guide to the common program requirements, which is under education and resources, as well as in Learn at ACGME. There's one for residency and one for fellowship, and it gives you some of the rationale behind each requirement and what they're looking for. And I know I can understand something better if I know why it's important or what I'm going to have to do to meet a requirement. I also want to call out the non-standard training program requirements because it's new. It's a new process in which the ACGME has taken over the approval of J1 visas for trainees in non-accredited programs. And as part of that, they've added some additional requirements for institutions and programs because of course they love requirements. These are pretty short, but they're separate, and it makes sense to read through them and to remember that they exist for questions about non-standard or non-accredited programs. Also useful to know if you happen to have any of these programs under your purview. I also want to call out the ACGME glossary of terms. It's a really helpful document, and I am not sure why they feel the need to bury it where it's hard to find, which is under policies and related materials. It's a searchable alphabetical list of lots and lots and lots of ACGME terms all in one place, and it's a really good way to get the sort of definitive definition of anything that you may be looking for. The next thing in the list from TAGME is ECFMG. And so depending on whether or not your program accepts international medical graduates, or IMGs, as they're often referred to, you may be more or less familiar with the ECFMG. But it is important to be aware of it, though, even if you don't currently accept IMGs, because you never know when you will have an exceptional candidate that your program might want to consider. And it sometimes comes up as an issue for faculty who might be joining your program related to their USMLE exams. It's very easy to stay up to date with this because they every year publish the online, they publish the ECFMG informational. So sorry, we're sliding the slides there. The ECFMG informational booklet for the current year. And you can sign up to be notified in, sorry, let me start that again. Read you can read the ECFMG online informational booklet for the current year, which will have all the requirements for that year and everything you need to know. And you can also sign up for their e-newsletter, which comes maybe once a month and is a good way to catch upcoming changes before they happen, and will also let you know once the new booklet for the next year has been published. GME Track, everyone's favorite topic at this time of year. It's a resident and fellow database and tracking system that's used by the American Association of Medical Colleges and the American Medical Association as part of their national GME census. And they use that for study outcomes, for trends. They look at data related to physician maps and physician shortages, all that kind of stuff. So it is, that's important. And it's also used by medical schools to track their graduates. So it's really important that you answer this accurately. You are required to enter the base information that they ask for, but you are not required to use the extra paid option that they have, even though they sometimes try to make it seem like you have to do that. You most definitely do not. You do need to complete that basic information annually, though. There's a program survey that's details about your program, length, recruitment dates, all that kind of stuff. And then the resident survey is just a roster of your residents and fellows and their current status. GME Track also feeds into FRIDA, which is a tool for residents and fellows to search training programs and get basic information. And I've heard some of my faculty debate about whether medical students or residents actually look at FRIDA, but I do assume that some do, and you want to make sure that your program is represented well, so you want to make sure that information is accurate and that you understand what's being asked of you. The NRMP, not everybody uses the NRMP. So if your program does use the NRMP, you're already familiar. If your program does not use the NRMP, you might not interact with it or have much reason to be familiar, but the rules and requirements are not terribly different from other matches like the San Francisco match or a specialty match. And many of their procedures and policies are just generally good practice for interviewing and selecting candidates anyway. So it's good to know what they are. Reviewing the match participation agreement annually is a good way to keep informed about the expectations, but remember that there are separate agreements for participants, for programs, and for institutions. So you want to be familiar with the requirements on all sides so that you know what everybody's expectations are. But even better than the match participation agreements are the additional resources that the NRMP has available on their website. They have lots of great documents and checklists that break it down into smaller chunks and provide some specifics, and give you checklists. I'm a big fan of checklists. They often have live webinars that they record and make available on the website as well. And even though I've been through a bunch of matches, I still watch that every year because it's good to get an annual refresher. Maintaining your knowledge can also help avoid potential match violations, which cause more work for you in the end, as well as potentially hurt your program's recruitment. So that was a lot, right? That is a lot of information. And maybe you're panicking, thinking, how am I ever going to know all this? You do not have to memorize all of this. Remember that. Don't memorize it. This stuff is all in the TAGME guide and also all online. So when you aren't preparing for the exam. So if someone asks you a question, whether that's the question on the TAGME exam or whether it's just in your daily life, you can look it up, you can research it and confirm your answer if you're not sure, or if you know the requirements have recently changed, you know where to find it. I've been in my job for a really long time, but I still look things up all the time. I have a few program directors who I swear to get together for coffee or something, and they come up with wacky situations that they can try to stump the GME office with. So I make sure I'm familiar with the documents I need, but I certainly can't recite them from memory. And even if I think I can, I often double check just to make sure that I really do know what I'm talking about.
We missed some of the recording, but we'll figure out a way to get that to you. Don't you worry. So I am going to start with this section, and then I am really good at video editing software, so I will figure out a way to get that back to you. So again, sorry about the confusion earlier with the Zooms. NSAMA thought it was important to have our own Zoom, but there is some logistical challenges with that, so it was my fault, and I completely apologize for that. Thank you, Terry, so much for that awesome overview. So I'm not going to actually give another overview, but I am going to talk about test taking and the TAGME test in general, and some of the things that you can do in order to help prepare for this specific test. But I wanted to start with some general test taking tips because I think it's been a really long time for me specifically since I have even had the opportunity to take a test, 5 years actually, since the last time I took this TAGME test. So I think remembering that, being prepared early is really important. I don't think any one of us is going to benefit from trying to cram in institutional requirements in the last hour before you take this test. Like Terry said, you should familiarize yourself, know where your resources are, practice searching the document, and then be ready early for the exam. You don't want to be rushing in, you don't want to be late, you want to be prepared and ready and have everything you need in order to take that test. Next, I think sometimes I get test taking anxiety. I don't know if anybody else, but sometimes I do. So I think, sitting up straight at your desk, taking a few deep breaths, physically and consciously relaxing your shoulders and repeating that, at different intervals throughout the exam can be really important for keeping ourselves calm and well during the exam. Next, I think reading instructions on any exam carefully is really important. So you want to make sure that you know exactly what they're asking you to do. I know there's a time limit for the TAGME exam, but that doesn't mean you have to rush through every single question. Take the time, look over the instructions, look over the exam when you get there, and then we will, and then you can go back and start. And then also, I think this is useful in a lot of places. There's a lot of data that shows that if you stand like Superman, maybe not a lot, but there's data that shows if you stand like Superman, prior to like a big speech or an interview or a test or something like that, you perform better on those things because you feel more confident. So I'll just say, when I interviewed at Boston Children's 8 years ago, I actually stood in the bathroom like Superman for 5 minutes in the stall. It is helpful. It makes you feel more confident. And I think doing that before an exam can really be impactful. Next slide, please. right, now specific TAGME test taking. So we'll talk a little bit about the study group later, where we do learn some things from people who have taken this test before. But I think in general, so I spoke to the TAGME representatives the other day, and they said that every single question on that exam is going to be found, the answer to that question will be found in the study guide. So as long as you have that study guide open, Control F is your best friend. But I also think sometimes when you just try to search one word in Control F, it can be confusing, or maybe you'll miss something. So try searching other words in the question to try to get the best answers. So Control F is going to be very important. Also, just because you see it, as Terry was saying, in the requirements, does not mean there's not going to be an additional information about that in the fact. So even if you think you know the answer, Control F, you look in those requirements, maybe keep going a little bit just to make sure there's not additional things that might be listed in the fact that they might want you to know for that answer. So for time management, I think somebody said the test is 5 hours. Is that 3? Is it 5, Terry? 3 or 5? Terry's on mute, but I have not taken the MLC exam, but Terry has. So regardless of how much time there is a limit on how much time you can spend on the test. So for me, I like to know how many questions the test is. And then I say, okay, this is a 3-hour test. I have 100 questions. I need to be at question 50 or around that by an hour and a half in. And I try to note that stuff. I think you can have a little piece of paper, write that down, and then just keep an eye on the time. Some people, when they do test taking, they panic and they overanalyze every single one of the questions. So they spend too much time on those first questions. One person noted that you can flag questions on the TAGME exam so that you can go back and think about those later. So you can go back and so what I suggest doing is, answering the questions that are easy. If you think the questions might be wrong, or you might want to think about that a little bit more, answer it to the best of your ability, flag that question, and then once you get through all the questions, go back through the flagged questions and spend more time on those things. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. Preparing for testing. So you cannot just do this test in a general office area where you generally work. There are certain things that you need to know about your test location. So you cannot have 2 screens. You cannot have other screens around you. That you have to basically be in a room with your computer, your mouse, your keyboard, and your study guide materials. And the test taker is going to look around that space and have you prove in that space that you are not you're not cheating in any way, shape, or form. It depends on the test taker. So I know when Terry told me an example where she, you're supposed to have a clear water bottle. So try to have a clear water bottle. But if you don't have a clear, then they might you might be able to get away with it. That they know you don't have, questions typed up on waterproof paper inside your water bottle, which seems crazy, but you never know. Also, like I said, clear the space around the space. I plan on taking my test in a conference room with my computer and having that just set up, and so that there's nothing around me and I don't have to worry about last minute reshuffling. Because like I said, I want to remove anything that's going to cause me to feel panicky or last minute the day of the exam. So I'm going to set up a space where there's not many things around, that I can just clearly show the test taker and that's set up for me. Also making sure you have solid internet. So even if I had a space at home that wasn't sort of cluttered with all my crap, I probably would still go into the office just to make sure that the probability of me having a test or an internet problem is really low, because that can be very, very disruptive. And I think lastly, letting your coworkers and family know and your friends know that you're going to be unavailable during that time. That way, one, you have a peace of mind that, they know that you're taking a test. If something goes wrong, then they're going to be, you're unavailable. You're just not available. You're not going to have your cell phone on you. You're not going to be on your email. You are going to be, is one of the few times that I feel like administrators actually really unavailable. But also I think it helps, just helps to find somebody else who can help, cover the general email for the day. Maybe you have somebody hold your phone. For me, my husband won't be bothering me, asking me where the mustard is, just different things that so that people know that you're completely unavailable. So yeah, I see the no's, yes, one monitor, I see that in the chat. Does anybody know the questions about split screen? Okay, yeah, split screen's okay. All right, next slide, please. The way I will tell you, the way you split your screen on a monitor using like a PC, not a Mac, is you hit the Windows screen and then you hit the left or right arrow, depending on which way you would like it to go. And then lastly, I think I said it again, but I think it can be important. Don't overthink each question. There are questions that are tricky, and it is, you know, some of them do trip you up in different ways, but don't overthink them. We know the answer to these things for the most part. We have the answers in the study guide in front of us. So answer them to the best of your ability, move on and go back later. Like I said, questions can be tricky, so read them carefully and then move forward. And then again, it's been a long time since some of us have taken a test. When you're in high school or college, it's just kind of second nature. It's been a long time for us. So it's okay to be nervous. And then lastly, just remember to breathe. We're going to be fine. We're all experts at finding answers to things, and we will be fine. The answers to the things. So that's it for the slides. Looking in the chat right now, the study guide can be online or printed. You can add, some people choose to add little sticky notes to their study guide and have that printed out. Most people choose to put the study guide online because one, you can use that Control F function instead of trying to go through 346 pages of material in a time limited test. Would be very difficult. 347 pages is a lot of trees to kill for something you're going to throw away after this exam, likely.
The first time I took it, I had to put it in my suitcase to take it to the ACGME conference, and I had to pull it out because my suitcase was so heavy. And so I appreciate that it's online, but I understand that desire for the tabbed paper. But I really do think that during the exam, it's a lot of time, but you really want to be able to use that Control F function because there are things in there that we don't do. Like there are questions maybe about the osteopathic requirements, and maybe you're not an osteopathic program, or maybe you've never used NRMP because you're a small program that doesn't have a match. And so really being able to look up those things and not worrying so much about trying to memorize everything, it's really good to have that. I do think that that online guide is available to you either way, though it's just part of the exam. It will be there whether you want it or not.
And just so you know, I did see questions about this being recorded and sent to NSAMA members only. I think for this one, since there was confusion at the beginning of the session about our Zoom, we'll send it out to everybody who came to the session as a YouTube link. So everybody who was signed up today, and we'll put it on the Facebook page as well. We'll be able to see this presentation.
Oh, that sounds great. And I can re-record my portion that was cut
That's
off.
also my boss. So when I ask her to please re-record this session, hopefully that doesn't show up in my yearly review next month.
I know Caitlin keeps trying to get me to fire her, but we have yet to discover anything that would possibly cause that yet. So I do think you can have both a paper copy and an electronic copy at the same time. They do in the requirement and the certification guide, which is updated every year. So it is a different guide every year. But I do believe in the instructions, at least when I took it last year, you were allowed to have the paper copy, and the electronic copy is just there no matter what. The proctor that I had was actually very helpful in telling me how to do that split screen thing, even though I didn't ask, but he mentioned that to me. So I think that he maybe had that question before. And the questions I see, we have a question about the types of questions on the exam. So for me, it was all multiple choice. I don't know if that's different for the initial exam.
For the initial exam, I believe it's multiple choice too, now that it's online. So they took away the sort of the longer paragraph answers that used to be in the initial exam. And I see some questions about, do you still need CME? You do need CME credit to take the exam, and I don't know the specific details, and it's different about whether you're taking it for the first time or whether you're recertifying, but there's so many things. This session you're at right now counts as continuing education. There's a lot of free continuing education out there. The ACGME's Learn at ACGME is a good way to do that. I know there are some specific requirements about related to your job and at your institution and all those kinds of things, but really, like, I'm always happy if somebody's trying to figure this out, just
please feel free to reach out and I will help you figure out where you can find all the professional development.
Right. And Terry, if you could share the screen one more time, I'll put the sign up for the study group. So you can use this for CME credit for sure. We do have a study group for TAGME that we formed through NSAMA. Anybody is welcome. You don't have to be a member. We meet every Thursday afternoon from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. So the people who originally requested it were Arizona time. So it's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. The registration is there, and we can put that in the chat as well. And we can also put it on the Facebook group. Terry, put it in the notes too. Are you able to stick that registration link in the tab?
I probably can when I am not sharing my screen.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So we'll do that. And then next slide, we do also have a couple other courses that are open if you're interested in like learning in general. So say you're not ready for the TAGME certification because you haven't been here 2 years yet, like a new administrator course is helpful. And all this can be found on the NSAMA website. We also have an advanced coordinator course that you can join as well. And then there is a survey for today, but I think we can skip that since it was there's no fee to join the study group. It's open to everybody. And what we're doing is we're going through the study guide section by section. And we're having different people sort of make up questions they feel might be asked on that section. And then we go through those questions in the polls. People fill them out, see if they got them right. And then we talk about those questions after.
And the study group is free. I see that question as I'm pasting the link. There's no charge whatsoever, and anybody is welcome, not just NSAMA members. And the Facebook page and group is the GME program administrators. It's all people at all levels of GME. It's a great group for resources and to ask for help or to see what other people are up to. And the questions, at least for me, when I took the exam, were not so much like, what is VC1B, but more like, how many hours can somebody work consecutively, or, you know, an interpretive question, and not specifically knowing what a particular requirement is referring to.
Another question in the chat, somebody's planning on it next year. You should definitely wait to print your study guide closer because they're going to update that closer to next year and take the questions for next year off the updated guide. Like I would assume there's going to be more about NSTs, for example, next year that wouldn't necessarily be in the current study guide. So you should definitely wait. And like I said, I will send everybody who registered, I will send the video for this too after, once we get it ready, since there was some issues in the beginning. And I can also include the link to that study guide in there. It's very helpful.
They did add a supplemental guide. I see Ashley just mentioned that. I think that they did not have the correct NRMP information in the guide. And so the supplemental guide is just the NRMP information. The test does display a timer, which for me was a little nerve-wracking, even though I had lots of time left. I don't know why, just seeing it tick down. But it did not. It took me for the 100 questions on the recertification exam. It took me about 2 hours. I definitely took my time. I really was cautious because sometimes I know for me, I read things quickly and I make a judgment without actually paying attention. And some of those questions are not really trying to trick you, but they're making sure that you understand the subtleties. So take your time, read the question. I'm sure the proctor thought I was weird because I didn't read them out loud, but I was moving my lips while reading them to try to make sure I was getting them. Just to take your time. And like Caitlin said, you can flag questions and go back. So don't spend 20 minutes on a question that you're not figuring out. Let that question go, mark it, and go back to it so that you can think about it for the entire time. See, like I see Emily is saying the same thing, like just being, and he did kind of look at me once when I read out loud, but he didn't tell me to stop. So, but I did flag a bunch of questions. If I couldn't immediately come up with the answer or find it right away, I flagged it and went back to it. And then I could spend more time because I could see how much time I had left. And I realized that for about half of it, I had finished pretty quickly. So that gave me sort of the peace of mind to know I could keep going and really take my time with the rest.
Yeah, and I think it does, the reading out loud probably depends on your proctor, but I have heard from other people that they were told they were not allowed to read the questions out loud because they're afraid that somebody could be like behind a wall or something, under your desk or something, and helping you answer those questions.
Yeah, I did have to give my proctor a very thorough video tour of my home office because he needed to make sure that I did not have my second monitor. I did not have anyone else in this room, in the room with me in any way, shape, or form. I had to go under my desk with the video camera, all of that. So I was lucky that we had just had a major renovation in this room, so it was pretty much empty. So I just moved a desk in and put my computer down. But think about that. Where you can be, where you're not going to have to rearrange your entire life or panic when they tell you that there's something in that space that you can't have. So really think about where you can do that.
I think it's funny because my husband doesn't even like really understand what I do at all, besides say much about like under the desk telling me the answers to my work questions. So Emily was saying in the chat how there was a 10-minute break and she took the entire break and it was helpful. Sort of step away and decompress a little bit and regroup.
I just want to say about that 10-minute break. When I took mine years ago, you could take a break, but you couldn't stop the clock, right?
Right.
And I went all the way to the end and I had to use the restroom so bad. And it made me tense because I didn't want to lose my time. So just knowing now that they have their break is great because you could not stop the time and you just felt like I can't even tell y'all what happened to me. If I tell y'all what happened to me, I think, yeah, just know I'm glad and grateful for the break.
Good.
Yeah, that first time I took it in a giant room with everyone, I know people get stressed out about the online, but it was the same thing. Like if you left the room, you couldn't have anything on you and you didn't get the time back. And so I didn't drink any water. I was very nervous about that. And I see a lot of people are asking about continuing education. You'll get emailed a certificate based on your email address that you use to register for this Zoom. But if you're listing your continuing education, you can count this as soon as you attend it. So TAGME is generally not asking you for documentation in the form of a certificate. They're just asking you to document what you actually attended. I know it's stressful taking an exam. Like it amazed me how much I was tense about it, even though I've been in my job a long time and this is the third time I was taking it. I was still nervous, but really it's okay that it's the searchable feature. Just take a deep breath, take your time. Like Caitlin said, you'll be fine.
And I've never heard of a practice exam for this. So.
And they really aren't going to ask you something that's not in the guide. Every question is in the guide.
Mm-hmm. And they called me up just to let me know, like, tell everyone all the questions, the answers can be found exactly in there. And they did say that some people try to sell you things that will help you study for this exam. And they were like, don't waste your money. Everything you need to know is in the guide. They took the questions from that guide.
And I wasn't surprised by any question, like thinking that it was a wacky question that didn't make sense or wasn't current. That had happened, I think, sometimes in the past with some of their previous exams, that requirements had changed and they hadn't really updated the question. But I felt like everything was what I would expect to be true and easy to figure out for the most part. There are some interesting wording, like you do have to read it because that's true in our lives, right? Not everyone's asking you the perfectly worded question. They want to make sure that you can figure out some of the subtleties that we all need to be aware of. So just be sure you're paying attention, read it out as out loud as you're allowed to by your proctor, read it again, flag it and go back just to be sure. And I don't know what happens if you have a power outage, but I have to assume that there has to be some allowance for that. I mean, things happen that you can't possibly predict. So I would imagine that they must have some sort of, I do believe that it's been a year now, but I do believe the proctor, I had a way to reach out to the proctor by phone if there was a problem. So I assume that you would just use that. I think there were some questions that had more than one choice. I believe that there, some of those choose A and B, A and C, A and D, all of the above. I do think there were some questions like that.
I have heard that some of the questions feel a little tricky and some of the wording can be tricky.
But GME is tricky, right? So, and you do find out immediately if you pass, which is great. That was way better than the first time I took it. And I had to wait there's no essay, it's all multiple choice. I had to wait a long time for those results. And so it was really nice to get it right away, to get the results right away. Although I see in the chat, someone mentioned that someone was told later that they hadn't passed when they were told immediately they had. I hope that was a rare occurrence and not a common thing. That would stress me out. But the one thing that I really do wish they would do is to tell you what questions you got wrong, so that you can, just for personal, professional development, so that I would have an idea of areas that I might need to improve on, or what your actual score was and not just the pass.
There were questions about credits and things like that. So I put the TAGME certification guide in the chat because they're the best people to answer those questions. And there are certain times of year that you can apply only. So I think they extended the MOC this year into sometime into August. I'm not sure if it has passed or not, but you should look at that and see the exact certification requirements for what your situation is.
It's August 15th for the MOC if you missed it. And I do think that the new innovation webinars do count. They have categories. If you read the guide, they'll tell you only a certain amount of webinars, a certain amount of different things count. But they will tell you, like presenting, as you do MOC, you have to present, and they talk about where you can be presenting. That counts. They do the same thing with the CE, what you can include and what you can't. And really, if you're short on webinars or short on education, Learn at ACGME has a ton of things. I know they don't make it so easy to notice it's there, but Learn at ACGME has a lot of potential education available to you. And aside from the fact that it's useful information, but it would count towards your continuing education. And there's this conference, there's the NSAMA conference, there's the AMI conference, there's so many different opportunities. I know some of them have a fee, but there are many things that are free as well. And I don't think they do publish pass rates or not. I do know people who are really good at their job and really smart who didn't pass it on the first try. Test taking is not everybody's strength, and it doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing and you're not doing a good job. They will give you the chance to retake the exam in the same year. I think there is a small additional fee, but maybe, so I know people who they freeze in a test taking situation. And so maybe that will happen to you, but don't let that defeat you. That's just one time. It doesn't necessarily prove what you know, right? It's just, now you've got that experience. And then when you go to take it again, you will be more prepared. You'll be more ready. You know how it's going to go, and you'll be able to succeed.
And then once you pass, thinking about 5 years seems like a long time, but it really does go fast. And so keeping track of some of those different opportunities and requirements for your MOC can be helpful, like, doing a presentation or running a course or something that's a little bit more of a leadership that they're looking for, and not trying to go back at the end of 5 years, because that can be difficult to track.
Yeah, I don't remember what I did yesterday, so I always write down everything that I go to. I just keep it in a Google sheet so that I can remember it when I need to.
And like I said earlier too, that study group is going to meet every Thursday from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time until I think November-ish until most people are done or people stop showing up. So feel free to join us. You can come to one or all of the sessions. Happy to have anyone.
If you have additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask, and we'll hang around either way. If people have questions that they think of and for the next few minutes or so. But we appreciate all of you joining us today. And for those of you that are taking the exam, best of luck. I'm sure you will do great.